Good afternoon, everyone. I never know whether to say good afternoon when it's only 12:30, but good afternoon nonetheless. I'd like to thank Claire very much for inviting me to deliver the keynote speech today. I think if you could just pop my slides up, that would be great. My outline of my presentation is to talk start off with a little bit of a potted history about me and why I think I might be able to talk to you about these subjects, and then to consider what the current trends and forecasts indicate we can expect as hopefully we emerge into this post-Brexit, post-pandemic world, and what I think the bridge sector is going to have to do to succeed in the environment that these things will generate. So if we start with a little potted history of me, I studied civil engineering at Liverpool University when I was the only girl on my course back in the 1980s. I then survived that and then got a post as a graduate trainee at Hampshire County Council. Back in those days, every size of council had its own graduate trainee civil engineering programme, and Hampshire's one was particularly good, and Hampshire graduates pop up all over the place. I just about finished my graduate training programme when my husband was relocated to Gloucestershire by his firm. So I wrote to the County Council at Gloucestershire and said, I'm free, you know, have you got any jobs, that sort of thing. And I was very lucky because they were just setting up the first iteration of their separate design and consultancy services at that time. And they had quite a number of vacancies. So I was interviewed for 3 jobs and was offered 2. One was as an engineer within Gloucestershire Design, and the other one was as a maintenance coordinator on the client side. I decided to choose the role on the client side, the maintenance coordinator role. Last week I celebrated my 31st anniversary of working for Gloucestershire County Council. No doubt if I'd taken the other option, my career would have gone in a very different way. But Gloucestershire is currently on its 7th iteration of the delivery arrangements for consultancy and contraction. So we've had quite a range of different things that I've had to use. I actually stopped looking after Gloucestershire's bridges in 2014 when I became the network manager, responsible for strategic asset management for the county. As well as my work at Gloucestershire, I've been involved in the work of ADEPT for many years, at both a regional and national level. I was chair of the ADEPT Bridges Group from 2014 to 2017, and I'm currently secretary to the Engineering Board. I'm a member of the United Kingdom Bridges Board since 2011, and I've been chair of that since 2017. So with these roles in different organisations, I've been involved in the development of a lot of codes of practice and standards and guidance, and I've seen a lot of changes over the past 36 years. What I feel that everyone needs to be is flexible and adaptable, and I think that's going to be a core part of my presentation today. So just wait 1 minute while I try the next slide function. There we go. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of a discussion about futurology. I've been asked to look at the bridge sector and how it will change, but I'm not Mystic Meg and I'm not a futurist or a futurologist. Futurology is the prediction of the future using scientific understanding. Now, we already use these every day. We have the weather forecast, sat-navs with journey times. Or more complex things, we use deterioration modelling. But on a longer time frame, futurologists back in the 1920s and 30s predicted genetic modification, space stations, wind power, artificial wombs, video phones, wireless internet and cyborgs. And it all seemed like science fiction at the time, and maybe some of it still does. Now, we are constantly evolving, but we do not evolve at a steady pace. We encounter what are called disruptive structural trends, difficult to say, but these have nothing to do with bending moment calculations or finite elements. They're often associated with a disruptive event, perhaps a new technological solution that will forever change an industry. If I was thinking back over 2 things that have completely changed my life, I would refer to the digital camera and Google Street View. These are 2 things which have changed the way I've worked hugely. The internet has enabled us to work more globally. Atkins, Gloucestershire's current term consultant, has a global design centre based in Bangalore in India. being the fact that we can work effectively with a team based thousands of miles away, working in a different time zone, is a result of disruptive structural trends. And we've got all sorts of other things. We find out things differently. We get our news differently. We pay for things differently. So all of these things have changed over the past few years. Another set of trends that we need to consider are those secular trends or social trends, which could be described as demographic based, affecting particular population sectors. We're probably all aware of the challenges of the ageing workforce, but I wasn't aware that 8% of the construction workforce in the UK comes from the EU. It doesn't feel that Brexit is going to make it as attractive for people across Europe to come to work in the UK, so that's going to put more pressure on recruitment. Now, I had to admit, I had to look up millennials and Generation Z. It turns out that my children are classed as millennials. Millennials are confident, ambitious, and achievement-oriented. They have high expectations of their employers. They tend to seek new challenges at work, and they aren't afraid to question authority. I can certainly confirm that that is the case with my children. But they came to adulthood in the middle of a global recession. They believe in political engagement and are civic-oriented. Now, obviously, you can't put a whole generation of people into a box, but there are identifiable trends. Ipsos Mori recently published a report on the different characteristics of the Generation Z demographic. Gen Z, as I call them now, are natives in the world of digital technology. Apparently, one definition of a Gen Z person is that they don't recognize the AOL startup sound. But they are facing really tough conditions. In countries like Britain, you've got a tough economy, a rapidly changing labour market, technology that brings threats as well as opportunities, polarised politics, and long-term trends such as increasing obesity. But there are many positive aspects to this cohort as well. Their interest in social action and ethical consumption, their dropping of some past habits, apparently binge drinking is becoming less attractive, their openness to difference on sexuality, gender, and immigration. And also, less of them are learning to drive. You might ask what this has to do with the bridge engineering sector, but hopefully the answer will be fairly obvious. The millennials and the Generation Zs are our upcoming workforce. These are the people we have to attract into the profession to make up for the skills gap being made by the ageing workforce. We need to make sure that the brightest and best of them look at civil engineering and bridge engineering specifically as where they want to work. My brief for this presentation was to talk about post-Brexit and post-pandemic. So let's have a quick look at the B word. I have briefly mentioned the impact of Brexit on the employment market. As I said, across the UK, 8% of the construction workforce comes from the EU. But in London, that figure is much higher, with an estimated 37% of the workforce coming from EU countries. According to government statistics, around 1/4 of construction materials used in the UK are imported, and around 2/3 of those come from the EU. There's uncertainty as to how tariffs may impact us, but it's likely that tariffs will lead to an inflation of prices from EU suppliers. It is, of course, good practice for contractors to ensure that that the channels of communication with their supply chain are kept open, so that this ensures that when issues do arise, there's good communication and dialogue already in place to resolve issues without causing pinch points and critical delays to projects. Whilst the risk of global pandemic had been recognised, there's no denying that the world is not ready for something like COVID, but the impact will be felt for years. A recent piece of work by Birmingham University identified the following as the key impacts and trends for 2021, which are all around how we reacted to COVID, both nationally and globally. The global economy experienced a massive recession. The UK government borrowed the largest amount of money since 1946. Consumer expenditure altered with a significant shift to online consumption. Traffic figures across the UK reduced by up to 70% in the first weeks of lockdown, but we still wanted to buy stuff. And online shopping with small van deliveries became the norm. There was also encouragement when we could get back out again to shop local, supporting local industries and microeconomies. The researchers have identified changes in energy consumption associated with a massive increase in telecommuting. Electricity consumption is now spread more evenly throughout the day without the massive peaks in the morning and evening where people wake up and then get home from work. Construction was encouraged from fairly early on, with essential maintenance basically not stopping. And as I will mention shortly, building back better is part of the government's recovery plan. But travel and transport is likely to be one of the last industries to recover, with a real issue around confidence in users for public transport systems. Although I've already mentioned the impact of telecommuting or e-commuting, traffic levels are anticipated to increase considerably above pre-pandemic levels unless we can encourage more people back onto trains and buses. And there is a tension developing about how working patterns will emerge post-pandemic. The Nationwide Building Society is closing its offices, encouraging people to work from home or in their branches. But Apple is insisting that all staff return to the office 3 days a week by September. Do we only insist that the people that we want to keep an eye on come back in? But how do we generate those spur-of-the-moment conversations that lead to progress when we have to schedule them into a Zoom meeting on a Thursday at 11 o'clock? At the start of this presentation, I did say that I was not Mystic Meg and couldn't predict the future. However, there are people whose work is based on analysing and predicting trends, both nationally and globally. A recent report by EY confirms that the economy will be driven by policy for some time, with levelling up, the move to net zero, and the drive to build global Britain as the priorities. It was certainly mentioned enough over the weekend. So it's important to have some understanding as to how these initiatives might impact the economy and what the opportunities arising could be. The government is promising a levelling up white paper and also a planning bill to make it easier to build new schools, homes and hospitals. There'll be a UK Community Renewal Fund, a levelling up fund, a community ownership fund, and I'm sure that all of these will mean bidding opportunities. And according to the government website, the UK government will work with local partners throughout 2021 to develop an approach that delivers the infrastructure and regeneration priorities that local leaders want to see in their area. A key trend for businesses, governments and individuals will be a focus on more responsible business behaviour combined with responsible consumption. And this will include a focus on the ongoing decarbonisation of production, of consumption and of construction. The Absolute Zero report was produced at the end of 2020, and it looks at how the UK can meet its targets for zero emissions by 2050. The industrial processes that produce cement and steel contribute significant emissions above their energy usage. So the authors of the report are saying that by 2030, we should only be using recycled steel and greatly reducing our use of cement by using alternative products. By 2050, we should be using no cement at all. And the challenge of removing cement from construction is probably the greatest single one, influencing the potential of achieving absolute zero. Construction is one of the last industries to truly modernise. Professor Cam Middleton recently spoke in an article in PBC Today, and he said, when will we finally turn around this accumulated wisdom into practice? Perhaps the shock and disruption of the COVID-19 crisis will provide a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to implement truly disruptive change to our industry. So again, we're talking about disruptive change, disruptive trends. So COVID shock and disruption may enable change, and it did, as demonstrated by the Nightingale hospitals, but climate change is the real threat that we're all facing and where the construction industry really needs to take things on. The UK Innovate Transforming Construction Challenge has set out its goals and targets. Those targets include projects being delivered 50% faster, a reduction of 33% in whole life costs, lifetime emissions slashed, and productivity raised by 15%. And the challenges that they are issuing to us are to adopt a manufacturing approach from suppliers to site, to embrace digital technologies around assurance, efficiency, BIM, and a shift to outcomes and not outputs. By that, I mean not building bridges for the sake of it, Not that they aren't lovely, but bridges for the sake of unlocking development, of linking communities and ensuring access to essential services. The skills gap has been talked about for years, with over a third of the construction workforce now over 50, and the proportion of under 30s dropping over the last 5 years. Basically, referring to my previous points, we haven't brought in enough millennials or Gen Zs into the business. In response to this, the Construction Leadership Council has now published a sector-wide skills plan developed by the industry. This snappily titled Industry Skills Plan for the UK Construction Sector 2021 to 25 sets out the key challenges. Those are improving access to opportunities for all and the attractiveness of careers, boosting all routes into industry, including enhanced work provision, a focus on competence with continuous professional development and sector-specific competency frameworks, upskilling for a modernised industry with a focus both on new technologies, but also on behaviours, on creativity, sustainability and inclusion. So for us, I think it means encouraging more STEM ambassadors, getting involved with local schools and colleges from primary to tertiary education, and developing our own skills academies and encouraging apprenticeships and traineeships into and within the business. I'm currently working with a company called Skills for STEM to develop a bespoke modular HNC degree course in civil engineering for Gloucestershire County Council. And this is for our new apprentices, but also for our existing staff. Now, I hope you all recognise this graphic. It's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. If you don't try and read the slide now, it's too small. Go and look it up after the conference. Now, these goals have obvious linkages to bridge engineering and management. There's responsible consumption, industry and innovation, life on land, life below water. But if you look wider, you would also include good health, well-being, quality education, gender equality, decent work, sustainable cities and communities. We all need to contribute as individuals, as employees, employers, as clients, designers, contractors, and suppliers. There's a critical role for clients and for regulators. If we want to lower carbon usage, there's a role in procurement and in specification of works. In the short term, there may be higher cost, but the long-term benefits are priceless. The UK has recently signed up to the Agile Nations Charter, which is the intention of that is to allow change and development to be brought in and not be hampered by regulation. So that'll be interesting to see if that helps us to move forward. So how is the bridge sector going to meet the current and future challenges? This slide shows a lot of the key words that I've used in my talk: flexible, agile, connected, innovative, and so on. But I think mainly we need to be more outward looking and less introspective. We need to learn from other industries who've already modernised. We need to be open to change around material usage and construction methods. We need to be more connected, more inclusive, and we really need to connect with Gen Z and make sure that we are an industry where they would want to work, because they can see that engineering, whether bridge engineering or any form of civil engineering, is an opportunity to deliver the carbon zero agenda and the social access and inclusion that they all see as essential. The profession of civil engineering was born from the Industrial Revolution with the vision of harnessing the forces of nature for the benefit of mankind. And there's no reason why the same doesn't apply today. And emphasising this is how we will meet the very significant challenges that we all face. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and find some of the answers to the challenges that I've raised in the other presentations that you'll be listening to. Thank you.